Hi, my name's Anita Powell, and I'm a community worker. So I'm actually self-employed. I work on all different types of projects, but I also do things around women's issues as well. In 2019 in Bedford, I started a menopause group because I realised that the voices of older women with regards to change just wasn't there. And because I was beginning to start the change and I did some research, I thought, oh my word, this is literally World War III happening to my body. And no one's given me any warning. You have warnings about all kinds of things, with regards to aging, but no one actually has educated, I know it's in the media now, but 3 years ago, no one talked about the impact of the menopause on older women, to the point where it could affect your hair, your skin, your sleep, your weight, your body shape, your temperament, your mental health. It can affect your eyesight, your teeth. Oh my word, don't even go back my teeth, my eyesight. And it can affect everything with regards to a woman, because it's a major hormonal depletion. It's the opposite of adolescence. And we know what moody teenagers are like. And we know that once an adolescence goes through the change, we know that they can do all kinds of things. I mean, they grow hair, they grow taller, their body changes, they can have children. But when you go for the menopause, you go for the exact reverse. You can't have children, your body changes, hair drops out. It's actually terrible. And nobody warns women that can potentially happen. And it starts to happen in your 40s, perimenopause starts, and no one warns you, because a lot of women, especially when you're 30s, when you hit 40s, you still kind of feel like you're in your 30s. So you kind of feel a bit sprightly, a bit like, I'm living life. And then life is kind of like, ooh, my hair looks a bit thinner, and white hairs are popping up everywhere, and I'm putting on weight, but I'm eating the same amount of food. I mean, I eat less now than I've ever eaten in my whole entire life, but I put on weight so easily. It's unbelievable. So no one prepares you. And I started an online group, which went to a face-to-face meeting. Was it 2019? When actually hardly anyone was talking about it. Not even Davina McCall was talking about menopause in 2019. Menopause was not even in her eyesight, quite frankly. She was not on TV talking about it. It was an education for me, because I was talking about it while I was learning about it, and I was creating spaces where women could come together and share their experiences, because loads of women have different experiences. Some women are really lucky, they can cruise through nothing at all. But some women, their lives literally turned upside down, even to the point where it has such an impact on it. It affects all their relationships, including their marriage and their relationships with their children. So it can be really impactful. So that's something I've done or doing, because I still do stuff around the menopause now, supporting women and getting the word out there. And I also do stuff around menopause and ethnicity as well, because when I did start the conversation around the menopause, I started a group, even though I'm a woman of colour, and I'm quite well known within the town that I live in, Bedford. I noticed that when I had my menopause conferences, because I had 2 in 2019, 90+% of the women that turned up were not of colour. And I live in a town where roughly about 30 to 40% of the population are from ethnic minority groups. So that to me was quite strange, because as a woman of colour, I just presumed that it would attract women of colour, and that the representation in the room would be quite similar to the representation of the town. I realised that was not the case. And ethnicity and equality and diversity and inclusion is so complicated. And even though I was there, it still didn't work. So I was lucky enough to meet a colleague called Nina, who started a group online called Black Women in Menopause. And together we then worked towards doing stuff around Black menopause, because we realized it was to address the equality issue. And also, I'm Black and she's Black. We're going through it. We also want a group that supports us as well, that we have to create a space where the narrative, the default narrative, was Black. And it wasn't about racism. It's about this, when your default is you're more likely to get optimum healthcare. So if you're talking about food or health, then the default automatically takes into consideration your cultural influences. Because even though there aren't really, that I know of, any differences between menopause with the different ethnicities on a biological level, and I say I don't know, and I'm saying that I don't think there is, with a question mark. And the reason why I say with a question mark is because generally the tests around the menopause are done on Caucasian women. So women of colour are not normally included in the research. So actually, if there are differences, I wouldn't know, because the scientists don't explore diversity when they do exploration around menopause for some reason. But I'm not aware that there are differences, but on a cultural level and the social impact of health on women of colour can influence their level of health. And we know that because of what's happened with COVID. We know that COVID has had a major impact on ethnic minorities. And even though there was the question, there's the thing about vitamin D deficiency. But other than that, it's been put down to actually social inequality. And even then, the question of vitamin D is still part of the conversation, because I discovered with COVID that loads of people of colour have a vitamin D deficiency. Because we're not the default patient in the doctor's surgery or as part of the kind of medical world, no one has really ever gone to people of colour and told them you need more vitamin D than someone who's Caucasian. Because to them, the default narrative was Caucasian. And, if you go outside for what they say 30 minutes or take an average vitamin D tablet if you need to, that's enough. But that's the presumption that the patient is Caucasian. If you're darker skinned, you need more vitamin D. You need to spend longer outside. And you also need to take a high dosage of vitamin D. So that's part of the problem. When you're never the default, the advice given never really accommodates your difference. And that can have an impact on your quality of health. So one of the things that we know about with regards to social inequality and health inequality is that things around income, things around housing can have an impact on your health. Also, the trust of the community with regards to the National Health Service. Ethnic minorities are less likely to trust them. But loads of things are taken into consideration when you want optimum healthcare. And when you're not the default, you're not able to fully explore these topics using a narrative that you are, you're not able to explore it in your narrative. And I found that actually creating a group, it wasn't so much, it was about excluding people who weren't Black. It was just making the default a Black narrative, because we do within the group have people turn up who are not Black. Sometimes they turn up because they want to have an understanding of menopause through the Black experience, or they just turn up because we're talking about menopause and they understand that the narrative, the default narrative is not them, and they take away from it what's relevant to them, and they enjoy it in the same way as a person of colour who might go to a menopause conversation where Black is not the default, and they'll go and they learn stuff and they'll take away from it stuff which is relevant. But yeah, we talk about things in relation to hair, Black hair. You would never get the conversation around Black hair and the impact on hair, because the menopause in a non-Black environment, you just wouldn't get it. So you would get no support or help. And we also we also include conversations around cultural food, what's good and what's not good, and also cultural taboos with regards to relationships, because menopause can have an impact on your relationships with your partners, family and friends, because it's a taboo on different levels based on different cultures. So I also do that. I also do projects with young people. Young people are fun. So I sometimes work with young people, and that's very often when I use media, because the young people, they're very good at media. So I'm not a media expert. I don't claim to be a media expert, but what I'm quite good at doing is get young people to talk about the things that matter to them, talk about the world that they live in. I like to educate young people on being able to understand different narratives, being able to explore different points of views, and also being able to articulate their feelings, but also be able to listen to others. So I'm more of an expert on the conversation rather than what button to press and when to press it. So they don't get much technical training from me, and they're so good anyway. They know what to do, but I help with the exploration of topics and being able to see different points of view. And I think that for young people, they need that a lot, because they're very much in echo chambers, which sometimes just reproduce stuff that they already know, and it doesn't explore and extend conversations. So they'll complain about things, but they don't actually understand that sometimes this other, because very often with young people, what I like to do is I like to do a conversation where I invoke money. So I hold up a coin to these young people and I say, are we looking at the same coin? And they all say yes. And I'll say, what do you see? And they'll either say heads or tails. And I say, well, I don't see heads. I see the opposite. I see tails and you see heads, but we're looking at the same coin. So even though you're convinced that you are right, I'm convinced that I'm right, but actually we're both right. And actually understanding sometimes that life is like that. People do have different narratives, and based on their perspective, their narrative is correct, even though it doesn't agree with yours. And I think young people have not been taught that. So very often I have that conversation with them, and I like to think they go away and they reflect on that, because I like to think I create a space of reflection where people analyze how they've behaved, analyze how they communicate with people, and analyze what actually matters to them as a human being. So I'm quite passionate about all kinds of things, really. And that's me.